Welcome to Table Talk, where there's always room at the table. I am your host, Jonathan Harmon of the J. Harmon Home Team, and we can't wait to talk to these fine guests. Enjoy the show. Everybody, hey Trent, I'm still struggling with this mic, dude. So this is gonna be the struggle bus microphone episode. It's gonna be fantastic. I can't wait. So I'm just gonna sit here and kind of cuddle it a little bit and keep it where it goes. You know, it's never a dull moment, especially when you go live. You know what I mean?
The countdown starts.
And it's like, and then it goes. You got to love it. Anyway, hey, everybody. It's Jonathan Harmon with the J. Harmon Home Team of Keller Williams. So good to see everybody. We're doing this a little bit different timing today. Everybody kind of had some different things going on. So wanted to make sure that we were able to get this episode in. It's pretty important. So a couple things. One, normally I sit here and talk glowingly about my friend Bryan Nale, and
you can still do that.
I mean, I
blush
can.
A little.
It's just it's like he's here, y'all. This is the man, Mr. Bryan Nale of First Horizon Mortgage. So you guys get an opportunity to. That was a really long set of applause. Usually it's like a 2 seconds. Anyway, that's good, Trent. Anyway, you got me flustered, man. But anyway, I'm so excited to have Bryan here. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff, including he's even got notes, which I don't. I feel a little upstage here. Look at this. Watch.
I'll say that the notes are just because my memory's not always the best.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Well, you're smarter than I am to write it down, though. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about interest rates and mortgages and kind of the current state of the market. We had a great conversation yesterday with the J. Harmon Home Team, and Bryan educated us a good amount on kind of what's going on right now, why it's going on, and what we can maybe expect. Of course, he's always going to say, I don't have a crystal ball, but and typically he's right. So he might actually have a crystal ball. He just doesn't want anybody to know about it.
Crystal ball is a good catchphrase.
Yeah. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
It's not actually a crystal ball. He actually reads tarot cards really well is what it is. But palm reading, that's it. But before we get to all of that, I want to go this way for a second. So Bryan started sponsoring this podcast. What are we at? 5 months now? 4 months?
4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And there's lots of reasons that he and I've talked about with that, but I want to hear it directly from you and let them hear from you. Why is it that you've chosen to put some of your treasure behind Trent and the Spread the Positive network and the things that we're doing here at STP?
Well, the spotlight that Trent puts on the community and the good things that are going on here locally is huge to me. I'm a big fan of all of Trent's activities and the things that he supports. So by supporting Spread the Positive, I can indirectly support a lot of other great people in the community who just need to get their message out with these great conversations. But also, I think it's important, like you and I were talking about yesterday, for people in our community to have conversations and have discussions. And so anytime that we have a chance to bring people together at a table in a public forum, like a podcast like this, it gives a chance for that positive news to be discussed in the community, for people to see it, watch it, view it, and digest it, and then maybe hear a side of the story that they didn't hear before. Maybe they just saw an article and they had a conclusion that they just jumped to from the headline, but it was behind a paywall, so they didn't get to read the full story. And they can come in here and get a little bit more context, a little bit more detail. So that's huge.
Yeah, and I think context is super important in all things, and to fill you guys in, the conversation that Bryan and I were specifically having is I'm interested in kind of changing to some extent, not necessarily the focus, but at least some of the content of this podcast, and bringing in some touchier, not taboo necessarily, but topics that business people don't like to publicly talk about. And what you and I talked about is that a lot of folks in this kind of climate that we're in, they're afraid to express an opinion for fear of alienating or somehow losing their business side audience, if that makes sense. And I think that roots back to an inability or a diminishing ability, let's put it that way, of people to disagree respectfully and disagree in a healthy manner. You know, social media has eroded that. If you've watched The Social Dilemma, you kind of see how that algorithm allows you to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the extremes.
To your own echo chamber.
That's it. And people just don't take the time, or I don't know, devote the heart. Maybe I'm not sure exactly the words to disagree respectfully.
Right.
And that's just, I don't know. That's sad to me. You know.
It's we talk about how there's certain topics you don't discuss at the family dinner table, around Thanksgiving. And I think at a certain point, we've crossed that line where maybe we need to start having those conversations with people that we love and understand where they're coming from. And at the end of the day, don't feel like it's a battle of words, but it's just an opportunity to hear the other side and appreciate and love on the person who you may not agree with, but you're still family. And if we can, have those conversations in civil discourse, that's important for us. And I would venture to guess that 90% of people would agree with the thought process of needing to have those discussions. But when they actually happen, how are we responding?
Mm-hmm.
What do we do when we actually are put in that position where we have the opportunity to talk to somebody who may have a different opinion politically, socially,
religiously, I mean, on and on and on,
whatever it may be. And so if we all feel the same way that we should be able to have those civil conversations and we long for that day when we used to do that, maybe we should, what color glasses are we looking back on? Like, do we have rose colored glasses on? Has it always been that way that we used to have these kinds of conversations? And to a certain extent, I think there's always been hands reaching across the aisle and compromise. And it seems like politically now we're in a state where any compromise is seen as failure.
Mm-hmm.
So
turncoats.
But at the same time, the old saying of, certain things you don't talk about at the dinner table were there because you didn't want to have a fight at Thanksgiving.
That's true.
So, but I think it's important. I think a lot of people have seen or at least heard about the movie Idiocracy, and I don't think any of us want to see us there. But it feels like we're sliding into it pretty quickly.
Yes.
So it's important to get those dialogues open. So I've got a ton of respect for you for wanting to do that.
I look at it like this. I think the vast majority of the answers are in the middle.
Yeah.
And yet the vast majority of the stuff that gets the most play, if you will, whether it's on airwaves or social media posts or whatever, tend to be on the far either side, right? Left or right. And the middle stuff, it just kind of gets overlooked. But that's the majority of people live and think in the middle.
Yeah.
And would agree, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. And, okay, yeah, I see that too. But, here's kind of where I am. And it's usually on that continuum in that, the bell curve.
Yeah.
Right. But yet that's not where we argue. And I think that a lot of folks have switched to, and especially because we do a lot of arguing behind the keyboard, they've switched to this kind of anonymity. Like they'll say, a lot of people will say something on a Facebook post that they would never in 100 million years say like this.
Right.
Why is that? Is that a peek into their heart? Is that like a desire to stir the pot? Is like what? Why?
I think it's just that at the end of the day, when they turn their computer off, they turn their screen off and they watch the news. What channel are they watching? And they just get reinforced that their way is that their biases are being pushed further, and that's the only right way.
I think it's a couple things. I think it's a desire to win conversations rather than to have a conversation to seek understanding. Yeah. Right? I don't want to win a conversation with you. Right. I want to understand the issue better by hearing your side and hearing Michelle just walked in, Michelle's side, and hearing Trent's side and hearing, everybody's side. I want to understand the issue better, not just win a conversation. I don't care if I win if I'm wrong.
Right.
Yeah. Or even if I'm not wrong, but I'm not fully right. Right. There's a difference there, So I think it's that. And I think that I think it's easier to push for a win and than it is to grow and challenge yourself.
It's a great observation. It's easier to just retreat to your corner and fight from there than it is to accept change.
Yeah, and admit that you might not have had it exactly right.
Maybe there's a little nuance to that black and white issue that you thought was black or white, and maybe there's some gray area there.
That's
Maybe
it.
there's something in the middle where people do agree.
Yeah,
To a certain extent, or can at least find some compromises.
That's it. I think it's the great philosopher Jerry Garcia that once said that there's a touch of gray.
I think
Yeah,
it was him.
not his best song, but it's a great song nonetheless. But anyway, so that's something that we were talking about yesterday, and something that I think if we can figure out a way, because I don't want to just sit here and do it by myself, right?
Right.
But I also want to be respectful for folks that, like yourself or whomever might sit in that seat. I'm not asking you to commit a professional suicide or anything like that. But I think it's important for us to model respectful discourse and respectful quest for understanding rather than let me just beat you up over this issue.
Yeah.
Because you're going to beat me back up, and at the end of the day, we're both just going to be bloody and nowhere near any kind of understanding.
Right. And if you believe in the in a lot of ulterior motive kind of theories, who wins when we fight each other?
No one.
The only people that are winning are the people that want us to don't look at what this hand's doing, right?
Yeah.
They want us looking over here. And meanwhile, this is happening and we're not paying attention to it.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right about that. That's a great point. So anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today, but it was on my heart, and it was something that you and I talked about yesterday, and it's something that I think we're going to move this particular podcast kind of towards. We'll figure out some ways to do that, and it comes down to you. Okay, so if you disagree with what I say, we can still be friends. I promise. It is possible, and I'm still a great real estate agent, even if you don't like my stance on pick an issue. Right. And same thing for Bryan. He's not a great real estate agent. He could be, though, if he really wanted to be. I'm certain that you could be, but he is a phenomenal mortgage lender and loan originator and understander of what's going on in our market right now. And that's what that was a segue. Do you like that?
Dude, your segues are getting strong.
Dude, that was fantastic, wasn't it? I'm right proud of that one. So Bryan, tell me what. Give me like a 2 or 3 minute summary of where we are in the market, right? And specifically where we are in the mortgage market, as far as rates go and all that. Where were we 6 months ago to right now? Give us that view.
So 6 months ago, we were in the low 3s. Now we're in the mid 5s. And the thing that I kind of look back at was what happened in 2018. We went from the low 3s, mid 3s to getting close to 4.5. And as soon as we started getting to 4, things slowed down, and they went on up to 4.5. And it really, that leveled the market out. There was a lot more, hey, let's see if the seller will pay our closing costs. Let's offer less than the house.
Some hesitation, shall we call it?
There was a lot more negotiation, and I don't think it was a buyer's market, but it certainly wasn't a seller's market either. It was just a level playing field.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that was shopping for a home could go out and look at 3 or 4 houses in a weekend. If they didn't like one, that's fine. We'll go next weekend, and then they could pick the house that they wanted to make an offer on, and have a reasonable likelihood of
that lasted
contract
like 2 months.
It was a brief window in time, but it was there. And that's, to me, what a healthy market probably looks like.
Yeah.
And what's happened this time is, man, we were, haven't said we're in the low 3s, and now we've shot up to the mid 5s, and it happened so fast.
I don't think we did we even touch the 4s? Like, for what, a week?
It was such a quick rise. There was no time for the market to kind of slow down to it. And there was such demand that was pent up. There were so many people that had been looking. And when they were like, hey, we got a house under contract. Wait, what? The rate's what? Oh, well, we got a house. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so the market didn't really have time to slow down and catch up to it. So what's going to be interesting to see is, where's that pain point, and how long do we have to sit at that pain point for the market to kind of level out? And that gets into supply and demand and population growth, and what people are looking for. You can look at, how many homes are being bought by speculators and investors, hedge funds, and what that's doing to the market, and all of those things. But at the end of the day, I think most people are kind of have 6% circled as a pain point where we'll get to that level. Question now is how soon. 2 months ago, I thought would be there by the end of the summer, but then the market's shifted a little bit. In the month of May, rates kind of retreated some, so now they've come racing back in the last 6 days or so. So where's it gonna go from here? Are we gonna kind of level out? And I'd love to see that. I'd love to give the market some time to respond to that, react to it, and see what people want to do and how that's going to play out. But I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll just blow right past this, mark on the graph and go right to that 6% and see what happens.
Yeah. It's hard to say. I think a few things that are very different now than in 2018 when that blip happened. One, we're post COVID at this point. And so for the last couple years, I know that the rates have been kind of held lower, and you were talking about this, the buying from the reserve and from the federal government of the mortgages, the mortgage-backed securities was a little bit artificial. And then they finally said, okay, we got to raise these rates. And the way that they did that is they stopped buying. Right.
So the Federal Reserve does a couple of things. They're fighting inflation. They don't want to see and it got away from them.
Yeah, 31% last year in Rutherford County house inflation.
So inflation ran away from them, and the reason that happened is because we wanted to raise rates. The Fed wanted rates to go up, mortgage rates and rates in general, in 2021. But the Delta variant was out, and then Omicron came out right behind it. And to kind of keep the economy stimulated and keep it going, they didn't raise rates. They started to. In February of last year, rates started to go up a little bit, and all thought, okay, here it comes. And then Delta, and boom, they kept buying bonds. And I think that's the hand. I talked about, like, don't look at this hand because this hand's doing this over here. It's not when they say they're going to raise, when the Federal Reserve meets and they raise rates. That's what catches the headlines, and that moves the Wall Street Journal prime rate. But that doesn't move the mortgage rates because the Fed is telegraphing what they're going to do. And so by the time they actually meet and they raise the rates 1/4 or 0.5%, the market's already priced that in for the last 6 weeks. So you'll see mortgage rates kind of move in advance of those announcements. But what's also really moving the market is, and you mentioned this, we talked about it last night, from when COVID came out, and everybody knows rates just fell off the table, straight to the floor.
Yeah, in the ones. I mean, in some cases,
it was absolutely wild. And the reason was because the Federal Reserve wanted to keep the economy going during COVID, and they knew it was going to be hard to do that. So they said, we'll buy, keep making mortgages, keep writing loans. We will buy those mortgage-backed securities.
We'll buy them all.
When you've got a buyer. So you didn't have to, the lenders didn't have to compete with other for investor dollars. And so any mortgage we did, we know we could bundle that and sell it and be backed by the Fed.
No matter how lousy the return is.
Right. Didn't matter what the rate was. Now with the Federal Reserve, and this is what really has moved the rates, is they've said, we're going to stop buying securities. We want to shrink our balance sheet. And that's moving the market up, because now when we have these bundles of mortgage-backed securities, we're selling those to people who are also interested in equities. They're also interested in venture capital. They're also interested in
treasury bonds, for Pete's sake.
Any kind of municipal bonds. So
yeah,
you're competing for investor dollars now, truly competing for investor dollars. And that's what's making mortgage rates go up.
Because the investor is not going to buy a 1% or a 2%.
There's no rate of return for them. It's just
makes no sense.
Even as safe as these mortgage-backed securities are now compared to where they were in 2006 and 2007, there's still got to be a return. So you're now, and that's, we talk about a healthy market and ways for the Federal Reserve to fight inflation. Well, that's a huge one right there.
Because essentially that keeps some of the money out of the market and means that you've got to go private with it, and they demand more than the government does.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So in knowing that, a couple questions. One, has it, from your perspective, from the mortgage industry, what effect has that had on your business? So on the mortgage business side of things, what effect has that had?
So you've seen some shrinking of margin because we all want to keep rates as low as we can for as long as we can. So the cost of doing a loan has stayed about the same, but the profit on that is shrinking. So what you're starting to see is a lot of contraction in the support staff. So you still have a lot of originators, and you will continue to have a lot of originators as long as they can still originate loans. But the back end support is going to start being tinkered with. So you're going to see a lot of your bigger national lenders, the online guys, they're going to start, having processors maybe taking on extra files, and reduction in workforce is certainly happening. And every mortgage Facebook group that I'm in, most of them have originators, processors, underwriters, loan officer assistants. And every day there's, it happened, I got laid off. Who's hiring? But you still see a lot of people say, hey, talk to me. And we're hiring, we're growing, we want to do mortgages.
And so where that affects anybody that's watching, where a loan might get done in 21 days when you're full staffed, now it might take 30 days or 35 days, right?
You want to make sure you know who you're working with. You want to make sure that the team that you're working with on your mortgage is going to still meet the commitments that you make for your closing date, because your closing date may impact 5 other moving trucks. And if you miss the closing date, you may lose the house. And it's important to not let that happen. So you want to know that the company that you're working for, if you know that you have to close on the 27th of the month, then, and it's 20 days from the day that you go under contract, you may want to think twice about who you're picking, because if you're picking the online lender with the low, really good looking interest rate, you got to ask yourself, what if they don't have the processing in place?
What am I giving up in order to get that?
Is that quarter of a point rate going to be worth me losing this house? Or should I just pay some points to buy that rate down a quarter of a point? And that way I don't pay it in life of loan interest. I just one-time charge, and I know I'm going to close on time. And
what you just said is that's where having a professional that you can sit down and go over the numbers. Because, let's say you spend $1,500 to buy a rate down. Okay, or $1,000 or whatever. How do I figure out if it's worth that or not? Right. And there's a process, there's a formula, there's some questions to answer. There's not a lot. It's not super complicated, but you need somebody that's going to hold your hand and ask the right questions in order to get you to the right answer, to figure out what your right answer is.
Right.
Because there's not a right answer, there's your right answer.
There are a lot of different ways to set up a mortgage, a lot of different ways to structure, different programs available, different cost of points, different strategies. Is this a forever home? Is it a starter home? You're going to be here for 3 or 4 years?
3 years? Is it 10 years? Is it, is it maybe it's 3 years and then maybe it's, that's a different strategy as well.
Yeah. All these things play into your decision process. And so and I'll give you an example. I locked a rate for a client yesterday, and the difference in his rate was 3/8 when we changed his down payment from 20% to 15%.
His rate went down.
His rate went down, and because the contract price he was under, there was a break point. I'm just gonna say it was $250,000. He gets a better pricing at a loan with 250. But if he put 20% down, his loan was 248,000. So he got a discount by bumping his loan amount up a little bit. And also, when you have PMI, sometimes your rate's going to be just a smidge better, because you have the risk is a little bit lower with a private mortgage insurance company covering the loan. So his rate literally improved 3/8 of a point, and his cash to close went down by 5%. So his payment's similar. It's in the same ballpark, but he's got a lot more cash in the bank right now than he would have if he was putting the 20%.
And fast forward a certain amount of time, and the PMI can roll off.
Right. And the PMI was and PMI is such a word that people, when they hear it, they instantly the skin starts to curl, and the hair on the neck starts to stand up. And his PMI was like $27 a month. It's great credit score, 15% down. It's really not much of a factor at all.
I love but that PMI is money I'll never see again. And I'm like, well, so is 3/8 of a point of interest.
Right. Right. And now you're not always going to get the 3/8. It just so happened that in his circumstance, it moved across a break point, and that helped save some money too.
But you had to know to analyze it that way.
Right.
Like you had to see the whole picture. And that's fantastic. And most people are just 100% rate conscious.
Yeah.
So good stuff. All right. What, I had something for you and it's gone. I've only had 1 cup of coffee this morning.
I know last night we talked about, we had a meeting last night that I was invited to attend. And so I know we had talked about, like, should somebody wait? And the question there is twofold to me. It's, if you wait till you have a little bit more money saved up for a down payment, what is the cost of the real estate going to do? And if we're in a market where it's going to kind of level off, then it may not move much. But if we're in a market where the interest rate, house prices are going to continue to go up some, there's a cost of waiting there. So I'd let you speak to that a little bit more. But just from a mortgage rate standpoint, I just did the math on this a few minutes ago, and and I was like, wow, you take this math and you see a number and you're like, oh, okay, there's a $57 difference a month in payment. But if you look at the total interest over the life of the loan, that's where it blew my mind. So let's say somebody's buying a $400,000 house. They're going to put down 5% today. That's what they have. But they really want to wait till they can put 10% down. So 5% down is going to give them a $380,000 mortgage. Let's say it's going to be at a rate of 5.5%. Their total principal and interest payment each month is $2,157. Full disclosure, these are not current market rates. These are just numbers that I put down for demonstration purposes. So if they
way to throw that disclaimer in there, that was good.
I mean, I've got to watch my back. Their total interest paid over the life of the loan is $396,735. If they never make an extra payment, if they pay on time, if in 30 years they'll wake up and that's how much money they will have paid in interest, $396,735.
So almost double the price of the house.
Right. Let's say, well, the price of the house is 400. So yeah.
In that case, almost double.
If they wait until they have 10% down. Now we don't know what the cost of the house is going to do, but let's just say that let's say the cost of the house stays the same at $400,000. Now they're going to get a mortgage for $360,000, but rates have gone up a quarter of a point and they're at 5.75. Their monthly payment's $2,100. There's a $57 difference. So they're saving $57 a month by waiting to buy the house. The total interest paid over the life of the loan is $396,310.
It's the same.
It's $425 different.
Interesting.
And that's where I was like, wow, that quarter of a point spike in rate. Even though they started out borrowing less money and their monthly payment is less, they're still going to pay basically the same amount of interest over 30 years.
And that is an assumption that the market is 100% flat. So but here's the thing, if that takes you 6 months to save up that extra 5%, even in a normal market, the house price is going to move some.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, maybe not much, but some.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, all bets are off. I mean, this changes if we do in fact start to see some correction, some pullback on the market. And again, I think that's where the most important thing for you to do is find somebody that you trust, find somebody that knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Find somebody that will run these numbers for you.
Yeah.
And make a decision based on your situation.
Well, and I think the thing to take away from that is you can't control what the interest rates are, but you can control your strategy.
Yes.
You can control your approach. And so working with people that you trust and that you have some confidence in to give you the right advice is key. And I'll go back to something that you say, and a lot of realtors that I respect, I hear them say this a lot. People ask, is now a good time for me to buy a house?
I don't know. Is it?
You tell me, do you need a home?
Yeah, exactly.
If you need a home, then it probably is a good time to buy a house because
Right.
historically we know what real estate does and it's a pretty safe place to go.
Yeah.
And I had a train of thought. Oh, foreclosures. People say, well, all these foreclosures are going to hit the market.
They're not.
And the fact of the matter is most economists now are starting to predict that we're going to go into a recession.
Sure.
So the question is, how deep is the recession going to be? How many people are going to lose their jobs? Right now, employment is strong, even with the fears of the recession coming, even with your big box retailers turning in weak reports and have excess inventory now because they ordered way advanced with supply chain problems. The stock markets, we all know what it's doing.
Nothing.
So even with all the stuff, we still have strong employment. So if people aren't losing their jobs, they have mortgages that they love that they just refinanced to 15 or 20-year terms in the last 2 years, and their rates are in the twos, they ain't moving. They're not going anywhere.
They don't have to.
So even if they lose their job and now they can't make their mortgage payment anymore, but I'm not going to just give the keys to the bank and say, hey, well, it didn't work out. I'm going to call Jonathan Harmon or somebody that I wanted to sell my house. I'm going to say, let's put a sign up.
Yeah. Cause I'm sitting on $200,000 worth of equity.
Yeah.
Or 100,000 or whatever. I'm sitting on substantial equity. If I bought my house, even at the beginning of last year, even at the end of last year, as of right now, right? If I bought my house in any kind of, if I bought my house, let's just put it that way, in 2021 or earlier, I'm sitting on equity.
Right. You're going to sell your home. You're not going to ruin
No.
your credit, take a foreclosure. You're not going to,
There's no reason to.
you take a foreclosure, you're going to go to an apartment and live, and you're not going to have any money, but you're going to sell the house. Now you've got some money in the bank to kind of ride the recession out, find a job that you want to come back to in the workforce with.
And the market will still absorb your house.
Yeah.
We're so far behind on inventory. The market will absorb your house. So to your point, the question, how deep will the recession go?
Right.
Now, are we talking about Depression era stuff? Are we talking about, 2, 3, 4 years? Yeah. I mean, of course, if we hit into a Great Depression type situation,
that changes everything.
That changes everything. Yeah. But we're not, that's not where we are.
Nobody really thinks that's going to be the case. The Fed was hoping for a soft landing in 2021 to try to stave off inflation. They weren't able to achieve that because of the virus and what we talked about a few minutes ago with Delta and Omicron, and how they had to keep the economy stimulated while there was still COVID concerns. So now the question is, how soft of a landing can they pull off in 2022? And I'm rooting for them. I want them to pull this off. I want us to just nail this thing and come out of it with just like that was a little uncomfortable, but let's go.
Yeah. Well, and the reality is we need what's going on right now. I mean, it's a matter of how we react. I tell people all the time that economics is essentially psychology with dollar signs.
Yeah.
In a big group.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's all it is. How do we react to this? What are we consuming information wise, and what are we doing with it? Right. Because sometimes we can self-fulfill the prophecy.
So that's 9 out of 10 times what happens is that you start hearing CNBC talking about recession and inflation, and
so you have a recession.
I mean, and we feel it. We feel the inflation. If you don't feel it, then you're not spending any money. But if you're
which
buying,
is good for you. Teach me.
I don't think you can live in America and not do that these days. But if you're filling up gas, if you're buying groceries, if you're planning a vacation, you're looking at the cost of flight tickets. We're certainly feeling that inflation. So the question is, do we find ways to buckle up, and tighten straps in some places, but continue to spend in others? And if everybody does a little bit of that, but doesn't just completely shut down their spending, then we'll come out of this with a light recession.
But even still, and I think this is probably the most important thing, is when we talk about a recession, we're not every market has to recede. And specifically the real estate market, we're and I forget exactly the stat, but we're at collectively as a country, we're sitting on more equity now than we have since I can't remember, the early 40s or something crazy.
Right.
And it's, so there's no reason for you to face a foreclosure or a short sale or anything like that. You're not going to get a short sale at this point.
Right.
The math doesn't work.
No, you're not upside down.
No, but definitely not a foreclosure. So here's what I will encourage you is, if you do, and just squirrel this away, right? Because it might be a year, it might be 2 years, it might be 3 years, it might be never. I hope it's never. But if you find yourself not able to make a house payment, don't ignore it, right? Don't ignore that. Get some advice, get some help. I've helped a lot of folks that are pre-foreclosure. Sometimes we did short sales, sometimes we didn't, but start early and you'll be able to get more of your money.
Yeah.
Right. You've paid it.
Yeah.
You earned it. You live there.
It's part of your net worth.
It's yours.
It's part of your net worth.
Don't ignore it and be like, oh, I'm going to fix this. That's gambler mentality. And it just, face the problem.
That's great advice.
So, and then get somebody that'll help you, that will help you face the problem and not just take your money.
Yeah. That's another good bit of advice.
Yeah. So I got to ask you this, and I think this is important. If everybody knows a mortgage lender, just like everybody knows a real estate agent, right? What has shifted from your business side of things as well? So are lending requirements tightening up? Are they loosening up? Obviously rates have an effect. Obviously, when rates spike like they have, and they've gone up pretty quickly, I'm assuming a decent part of your business last year and prior was in refi, and that's probably dried up, other than prescriptive type refis, divorces, and things like that. So what has shifted in the mortgage lending business, and are we still going to have where everybody knows a mortgage lender? Everybody's next door neighbor is a mortgage lender.
Well, we talked a little bit ago about just it's going to be the back office first, the support staff that you'll see some contraction in,
because they actually have to pay them each week.
Right. They're not commission based employees. They actually draw a salary. So you're and that's going to make it harder, because the loan officer who is able to just take an application and put it in an envelope and hand it to a processor and say, hey, help me close this. They're going to have to do a little bit more of the work themselves. And some people won't have the knowledge to, and some people won't have the appetite to. It's not going to be easy low hanging fruit. So they're going to leave the business. As far as what I'm seeing in our team, we're strong and still doing a good bit of loans. The refinance business is certainly gone, like you said, unless there's a reason that somebody needs to refinance, it's just not happening. So if somebody's like, hey, I'm thinking about consolidating some debt because my credit card interest is high, we're going to look at it and say, well, what's your rate on your first mortgage? Does it make sense to refinance that large sum? Is it better to do a consolidation through a HELOC? Let's have some conversation about getting you into the right place, into the right product. I think you'll start to see a little bit of as things in the recession play out, we'll see a little bit of tightening in HELOC strategies and what banks are doing as far as letting people get into their home equity. But thankfully, that really started, coming right out of the recession we had last time. Banks were not super aggressive with how much they were letting people tap into their equity
because they got burned in 08.
They got toasted.
Yeah.
So you're that's already helped out. That's already staved off what might have been the first wave of foreclosures going into COVID and during the middle of all of that. Of course, we got some protection from the foreclosure moratorium, but just even coming out of it, there were still a lot of people who weren't working who needed to extend their forbearances. I'm seeing also very limited inventory as far as existing home. Like my pipeline right now is full of people buying new construction houses. And that tells me something that I've seen coming is I'm seeing it kind of play out. All of these people who refinanced in the last couple of years are home. They don't want to move. And also playing into that is, the people who may have been in a starter home, when they sell to an investor, they sell to a hedge fund. Those are buy and hold strategies. Those aren't.
And man, we could spend a whole day talking about that.
Yeah.
They may not ever, those houses might not ever be available.
They may never see the market. They may never see the open market
ever again.
Right.
Like ever.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah.
So there's a way that could happen for some of the hedge funds if they start selling to each other in packages and things like that. That house will never be on the market again.
So it'll never be available if somebody buys a starter home. So I'm seeing more and more, and it's interesting to watch it play out because it's something that as the industry continues to develop and you start to see more and more. I used to have to compete against a preferred lender. So a builder would have a preferred lender that they were friends with, that they had a relationship with,
gave some kind of credit.
They maybe there was something, backdoor that was not supposed to happen. That was, who knows, right?
Sure.
You had preferred lenders. Now I'm seeing more and more, especially with the national builders, they have an in-house lender. And there's a key difference between an in-house lender that the builder owns and a preferred lender that they just trust to get the job done. If you're buying a new construction home and you're using the title company that is owned by the builder and a mortgage company that's owned by the builder, and they're cutting your representation out because they don't want you to, they want your representation to be the on-site agent. Who's watching out for you? You're buying a house. You're making a
pretty sophisticated purchase.
Somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 transaction for most new construction homes these days.
It ties up the majority of your net worth.
And there's nobody in there saying this is a good deal for you, or questioning fees, or questioning the program that they've picked for you. And most people don't have the knowledge to go through that. You can read about mortgages, you can study, and you can get a good base understanding. But when it comes to the nuances of setting up your financing, there's nobody in your corner. And that doesn't stop there, because your lender knows just enough to be a little dangerous when it comes to the house. The lender's never going to go into the home and see that the baseboards don't match, or that the stairs are uneven, or anything for that matter that a realtor might see. The title side of things, who's watching out for you to make sure that the title isn't charging you extra fees for all the fees they're cutting out on the loan,
shifting the profit around,
and that's all that's happening. So anyway, I'm seeing that start to happen, and looking at my pipeline, how much it's laden with new construction. It makes me wonder, where does this go?
But the thing is, new construction's always been the stopgap, right? Yeah. So existing home sales, the quantity of them doesn't fluctuate a ton. It fluctuates some, but usually if you really pull back and you start looking at it, when we've had spikes in inventory and we've had, lulls in inventory, almost always it's on the shoulders of the new construction. So over the last 2 years, supply chain disruptions, labor disruptions, all the different things that have happened, less land being developed. I mean, there's several things that have contributed to new construction inventory being significantly lower than it really, I guess, should have been.
And I think the key difference this time that we have not had before is, and again, it could be a whole nother hour conversation, and you know exactly what I'm about to say. I can see it in your eyes. You didn't have hedge funds in Wall Street buying up tens of thousands of houses a year.
2% of every real estate deal that happened in Rutherford County in 2021, 2% of the entirety of all the deals that happened in Rutherford County, including new construction. So every deal that happened in Rutherford County, 2% of them were purchases by two companies.
Two companies.
Not
just investors. That's just two companies. So
that's scary, dude.
Yeah. And that's just 1 year. So 2% this year, 2% last year, 2% next year.
Yeah. And it's 2% of all deals, including the new construction that they bought zero of.
Right. So those are some serious, you're talking about what's happening in my industry and what I'm looking at in the forecast. And those are the things that make me go, how do I stay relevant in that kind of market? How do I stay valuable to clients, valuable to my referral partners? How do I stay relevant in that conversation in that kind of market?
Yeah. And that starts bringing in, if I'm a seller, I start looking at things like civic duty, and it's like, but there's also duty to my family, and you know what I mean? So I get it, but it does enter the conversation. Well, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate all that you do. I appreciate you sponsoring this podcast and Spread the Positive and helping us get good news out into the world and bringing light to what's going right. And all the things that Trent back there, he's hiding behind the curtain, all the things that Trent does and what we do here out of the studio. So you keep being you, doing what you do. I didn't even mean to rhyme. That was awesome. Yeah.
Your segues, your rhyme game.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you, I'm a natural
pro. You're a pro.
But anyway, if you need mortgage advice, mortgage help, or a mortgage, call my friend Bryan over at First Horizon Mortgage. There's obviously he knows what he's talking about, but more importantly, he cares about your situation. And I think that's the number one reason that I love you, man. That's it. If you need real estate help, give me a shout. And other than that, man, go out and have a great week this week. Go, as John would say, put a smile on someone's face and just do something nice. Just something nice.
Thank you, Bryan.
Just one thing.
Yes, sir, Trent.
All right. See ya. Y'all have a good week.